Hello, and thank you for joining me on ILTV. I'm Aaron Porras, and for the last few years, it's been my pleasure to provide you with the insider's look at Israel and the Middle East in English. Your support for us means the world. But there's so much more of Israel to see and do. That's why I'm honored to introduce our all-new streaming platform, ILTV+, where you'll find all of the classic and original ILTV content that you know and love, plus so much more. I'm talking more direct engagement with me and the ILTV team, live streams from holy sites, interviews and lectures with the nation's top minds and personalities, and virtual walking tours across the country, just to name a few. What you won't find are ads, sponsored content, and special interests. It's just Israel 24/7 in the palm of your hand. So sign up for your free trial today at ILTV.tv or through the Apple app and Google Play stores. See you there.
Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm the Darga Velazi, and before we begin, I want to again remind you not to forget about our all-new streaming platform, ILTV+, available on every app store and at ILTV.tv. Now, coming up in today's newscast, Israeli medical panel overwhelmingly approves vaccinations against the coronavirus for children aged 5 to 11. How has the COVID-19 pandemic affected the Israeli high-tech ecosystem? And Santa Claus visits the Sea of Galilee to officially kick off the holiday season and spread some cheer to residents in the north of Israel. We begin with updates on the coronavirus. The Health Ministry panel of medical experts on the coronavirus Wednesday night overwhelmingly voted in favor of approving vaccinations for children ages 5 to 11. 73 experts out of 75 voted in favor of administering the Pfizer pediatric COVID-19 vaccine. The move follows the approval by the United States Food and Drug Administration last month.
שהמטרה המרכזית היא שמירה על בריאות הילדים כפרטים. ובסופו של יום ההחלטה היא אוטונומית ולשיקולה הפרטי של כל משפחה, ועליה להיות נטולת כפייה.
Additionally, on Thursday, Prime Minister Naftali Bennett leading a national drill to test nationwide preparations in the event of an outbreak of a new lethal COVID-19 variant. And so joining us now to discuss all these latest developments is Professor Nadav Davidovich, Director of the School of Public Health at Ben-Gurion University. So let's start with the vaccinations. I mean, when can we expect to actually see children in Israel receiving the vaccine?
So there are still a few more things to do in the process. The Director General, Professor Nachman Ash, he's finally the one that is approving as an emergency measure the vaccine. Probably is going to do it in the next few days, and next week we are going to get the first shipment. Then we need to have all the health funds in other places, probably schools later, being prepared. I don't think this would be a major problem. We need to remember that the vials are different. It's a different dosage, and this is also something that need to be taken care. But Israel is very well prepared. Of course, we need also to do all the communications and talking with all the parents. And I think that this is finally an excellent move forward. Vaccines are crucial, including in this age. Children are suffering, not as adults, but still we had the PIMS, we had the long COVID. And in contrast to what is sometimes presented in the media, about 50% to 2/3 of parents are very eager to vaccinate their children. On personal level, I have 2 grandchildren. The younger one, Amit, is going to turn 5 by the end of the month, so is exactly entering this stage. And many parents are eager, to stop all isolations and all these.
You say that many parents are eager, but I have to ask, Israel, unlike the rest of the world, had just come out of the 4th wave of the coronavirus. We have very few cases in the country right now. And add to the fact, as you mentioned, that children generally tend to have very few symptoms of coronavirus. I mean, first of all, is now really the time to vaccinate them, or should we be waiting perhaps for a 5th wave before we start vaccinating children?
Now it's the best time because we are in low numbers. We need to prepare because probably there'll be another wave. Corona is now hitting the world, including in Europe. So now it's the best time. You know, we are vaccinating now also for measles, although we don't have now outbreaks of measles. The whole idea is about prevention. When we're going to have a new wave, this will be too late. And again, most cases now are among children up to age of 11 because they are not vaccinated. I think it's giving excellent protection on personal level, and the alternative of getting the natural infection is much more dangerous. And second, it's not just a personal level, it's indeed a solidarity because it's increasing the community protection. Of course, we're going to do all the surveillance that is needed, but the dosage is 1/3 than the regular one. And we saw the Pfizer data. We're not expecting more side effects, maybe even less. And I think that finally, this is the right decision. I'm against enforcement, so we need to talk with the parents, and they're going to make the decision, and I'm sure that many of them will make the right choice.
All right, Professor Nadav Davidovich, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you.
And moving on, the COVID-19 pandemic has greatly impacted the world business economy. But despite the work-from-home models and market insecurity, many global and Israeli tech companies have adapted and thrived. And in fact, this year, more investments than ever have poured into Israeli enterprise. That said, there are still a number of issues plaguing the industry. So just how has the pandemic affected the Israeli high-tech scene? Joining me to discuss is Meir Valman, Director of the Research Department at Startup Nation Central. Welcome. So we're coming out of a worldwide pandemic, and many countries actually are still in the midst of it. And yet we hear that the startup and tech scene has flourished in many areas. So looking at a global scale to begin with, how has the pandemic impacted the high-tech scene?
So it's very interesting. The high-tech scene has been one of the big winners coming out of the pandemic. The initial cause was really government policies in many parts of the world. So easy monetary policy, support for the stock market, and that allowed money to keep flowing into the high-tech scene. But more fundamentally than that, what we saw was actually a big change in the way people work and the way people live, which tremendously benefited the sector. So if you think about how we change the way we work, if we will start working remotely, this is something that we hadn't done before, but it requires many kinds of new systems in order to work. And the high-tech sector was able to provide many of the solutions that were needed there. If you think about the way we changed in the way we live, e-commerce was something that's been around for a while, but adoption of it was quite low in many areas. Once the pandemic came along, people had to be locked up at home. Almost every shop had to have an online presence, otherwise it simply couldn't survive. And many people had to learn how to shop online who hadn't before. So, my parents in their 80s never shopped online before, had to do all their grocery shopping online. They simply learned what to do, and suddenly online shopping went through the roof. And the payment systems needed to run that also needed to be adapted and bought by many customers in order to enable that to happen.
Now let's take a look specifically at Israel. I mean, we've seen a major increase in the number of investments pouring into Israeli startups. So why is this the case? I mean, did Israel do something differently than the rest of the world?
So the Israeli ecosystem is very unique in many ways. The nature of the ecosystem is such that we have an emphasis on the software sector. And particularly 3 sectors I'd like to point out who have benefited the most. There's a cybersecurity, fintech, and enterprise software. These are all pure software sectors, and these are all sectors which saw a huge increase in demand as a result of the pandemic. So this is something about the Israeli ecosystem which is most suited to provide these solutions. The timing was also particularly good. So a lot of Israeli startups had reached the stage whereby they had a product, it was a released product, and when demand increased for their products, they could suddenly supply a lot more of it, and sales could increase to the people who needed it.